In what way do these verses introduce the cosmic Messiah and describe his mission on behalf of those who believe in him? Again, the gospel called John is a document written in an anti-language for an anti-society. Focus is always on the interpersonal. Hence, the general purpose of the gospel is to support interpersonal bonding and emotional anchorage of the members of the Jesus group with one another, with Jesus, and with God. What we learn from this opening piece, chapter 1, verses 1 to 18, is that thanks to the coming of the Word of God, enfleshed in Israel in the person of Jesus of Nazareth, members of John's group have become teknatheu, children of God. John's is a gospel of a close-knit, loyal in-group that stands over against this world and the Judeans. Look at that image there. Those in the cross have this energy, this life, this stickiness, this in-group glue. And other groups are excluded. You see the ones on the exterior? They don't share that life. They're not teknatheu, children of God. The members inside that cross form an anti-society, a group in opposition to the dominant society, Israel. This poem, chapter 1, verses 1 to 18, introduces the reader to the cosmic status of Israel's Messiah, who has brought this Johannine group into being. In these verses, we also get the first glimpses of the bewildering variety of terms the author, John, uses and piles up to articulate the polar oppositions between his anti-society group and Israel called Cosmon, the world. So these verses, chapter 1 through 18, are thus a first look at the peculiar anti-language of John's gospel, which is so important for us in Bible Alive for understanding the way in which this gospel functioned for its community. In proceeding, therefore, with this class, and all these classes, it will be especially important for all you Bible Alive students to understand the relationship between anti-society and anti-language. So I need you to go back to those first introductory classes in your minds again and again, because we're going to be drawing from that well as we go through these classes. John chapter 1, verses 1 to 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was turned toward God. And what God was, the Word also was. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made. What took place in him was life, and the life was the light of humankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. En archē en logos, kai logos en proston thaion, kai theos in logos. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was turned toward God, and what God was, the Word also was. That's verse 1. The fourth gospel begins in Greek en archē, which means in the beginning, at the start. Look at that Greek word archē. Are there any English words you can see with archē in it as a prefix or suffix?
Monarchy.
Monarchy. One rule. What else? Archaeology, right? Study of the older things, the first things, the ancient things. Archē. Archaeology. What else? How about hierarchy? Right? Or architect. Huh? A builder, construction. Interesting, right? Archē is a very important Greek word. Has a lot of meaning even for us in English. An educated Mediterranean elite in the 1st or 2nd century would be familiar with the opening words of the gospel if he read them according to common Mediterranean usage. They were loaded for him as a person exposed to Greek thought. En archē en ho logos, kai ho logos en proston theon, kai theos en ho logos. He would have much to think about if he was exposed to that. Not necessarily in the way that the Johannine author intended. Because again, this is anti-language. Remember, the Gospel of John begins in the beginning, or en archē. In ancient Greek thought, the archē meant first, chief, head, beginning, origin, first cause.
So sorry.
Its extended meaning can include rule, sovereignty, and domination, like monarch. The archē is the source of all things that exist, according to Hesiod. According to Anaximander, the archē was the eternal and the ageless. And according to Aristotle, the archē was the first principle for everything. What sort of themes are present in words containing the Greek archē, either as a prefix or suffix? Think about it. Archaeology, archaic, architect, archangel, patriarchy, monarchy, hierarchy, and archē en ho logos. The use of the imperfect tense of the verb to be, ein, and archē en ho logos, places the logos, the word, outside the limits of time and place, neither of which existed an archē. Ho logos, the word, pre-exists the human story. And the word does not pre-exist for its own sake, but proston theon, in relationship with God. And archē en ho logos, for its own sake, kai ho logos en proston theon, dynamically turned toward God. Let's compare, taking a cue from Rose, John chapter 1 verse 1 with Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and 1 John chapter 1 verse 1. John chapter 1 verse 1, en archē en ho logos kai ho logos en proston theon kai theos en ho logos. In the beginning was the Word was turned toward God, and what God was, the Word also was. Genesis 1 verse 1, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et eretz. In the beginning created God the sky vaults and the earth. 1 John chapter 1 verse 1, what was from the beginning? What we have heard, what we have seen with our eyes, what we looked upon and touched with our hands concerns the word of life. You see a relationship between those three texts? Yes or no?
John's the same, from the same author?
They are from the same community. The author of 1 John is a follower who is probably seeing his community disintegrate into multiple Johannine Jesus groups with different interpretations of the fourth gospel we call John. And he's desperately trying to keep the ship together, reacting to one of these groups, or several of these groups that are false brethren. They weren't true to us. They went out from us. Okay? That's interesting, the Johannine letters, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. But the thought is clearly the same. You can clearly see he draws inspiration from the fourth gospel. Just as the author of the fourth gospel perhaps drew inspiration, not perhaps, from Genesis. How does John, the author of the fourth gospel, allude to the beginning of Genesis? In the beginning was the Word. In the beginning created God the sky vaults and the earth. God created the sky vaults and the earth, according to Genesis. How is this act of creation described in the following text? 1 Corinthians 8, verse 6. Paul writes, "Yet for us there is one God, the Father, from whom all things are, and for whom we exist, and one Lord, Jesus Messiah, through whom all things are, and through whom we exist." Colossians chapter 1, verse 16. This is an author writing in the name of Paul, with his pseudonym. "For in him were created," him Christ, "for in him were created all things in sky vault and on earth, the visible and the invisible." Does that sound like our creed?
Yes.
Whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. These are constellations seen as non-human persons in the sky vaults. All things were created through him and for him. Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 to 2. "In times past, God spoke in partial and various ways to our ancestors through the prophets. In these last days, he spoke to us through a Son, whom he made heir of all things and through whom he created the universe." Yes, Danny.
I just, it's not necessarily about the readings or what we're discussing, but it's just that Paul always says principalities a lot.
Yeah.
In a lot of his writings. Whether those principalities means what exists on earth,
No.
earthly beings.
These are sky vault beings that are non-human persons other than human persons that are constellations.
What do you say principalities? Something that never didn't exist?
No, not at all. Mediterranean sky lore
Yeah.
was shared by different Mediterranean persons. Could somebody, whose is that?
It's coming from
Sorry.
over there. It's him.
Oh. Mediterranean sky lore,
Yeah. Sorry.
common Mediterranean sky lore, okay, believe that the stars and stellar patterns that populated the imagined vault of the sky ruled over different geographic regions and peoples and ethnic peoples. Angels is one way of thinking of these beings. And some are good, and some are mischievous, and some are just plain malevolent.
Okay.
And so those thrones and powers and principalities are how God's will gets enacted through all things. And yeah, they're principalities and powers. We no longer think that way, do we, when we look up at the sky? No, we don't. Okay. That should tell you something when you go to a Christian group, a Catholic group, and they say, "Let's talk about demons. Let's talk about angels." Okay. I'm the one they never want to bring to that group. Because I'll tell you about demons. In fact, around July, I'll show you Satan up in the sky. Constellation Scorpio Libra.
But doesn't Jesus have his own legion of demons?
Doesn't he have his own legion of angels? Demons? I don't know about demons. By the way, these are loaded words, angels and demons.
Right.
Loaded words. Does he have, in John, he could anytime he want bring a legion of angels. He didn't though. Johannine Jesus sounds very different than the synoptic Jesus. Let's continue. What does it mean that the word was proston theon, turned toward God? Why don't we get the text seen there? Is the text seen on the camera? Mary?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. John chapter 17, verse 5. Now, Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory that I had with you before the world was made. John 17, 25 to 26. O righteous Father, the world has not known you, but I have known you, and these know that you have sent me. I made known to them your name, and I will make it known, that the stickiness, the ingroup glue, the love with which you have stuck to me may be in them, and I in them. What does it mean that the word was turned toward God, proston theon? Why put it that way? Why put it as the word was turned toward God and not have what you have in your English Bibles, which is, in the beginning was the word was with God? Why are you translating it, Bill, or going to a scholar who translates it, Francis Maloney, turned toward God, when in my English Bible it says with God? Well, that's a bad choice that, I'm sorry, the New American Bible and the Revised Standard Version make. The word was with God. With is static. The Greek preposition pros means more than just the static with. Like, you know, this phone is with this video controller. Okay? Pros has a sense of motion toward the person or thing that follows. A dynamism. A relationship. Therefore, scholar Francis J. Maloney translates the word was turned toward God. Turned toward God because there is a dynamism in that relationship that he feels has to be conveyed. And I do too. And following his scholarship, I'm presenting it to you like that. It's not a static thing. The word and God were not static, just with each other. They were dynamically in relationship. That's the idea. Yes, Dan.
Would we believe then that with meant consubstantial?
No.
That it was the same substance?
That's a far later development. Far later development.
Because that's what I thought it meant.
Yeah.
That it was with, then it's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we should turn off some things. Okay, John chapter 1, verse 1. En archē en hologos, kai hologos en proston theon, kai theos en hologos. Translation, in the beginning was the word was turned toward God, and what God was, the word also was. This is also somewhat unfamiliar to you if you've read John a lot. You know, it's usually translated, in the beginning was the word was with God, and the word was God. Just like that. But actually, that's not a good translation either. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was turned toward God, and what God was, the Word also was. This gets a little bit into what Dandy's talking about, or asking. What God was, the Word also was. Why not Bill simply just put, the Word was God? Well, verse 1 concludes with a description of the consequences of the intense intimacy between the Word and God. The intense intimacy, proston theon. The logos is proston theon. Okay? Intensely turned toward, dynamically in relationship with. Maloney explains that the Koine Greek sentence, kai theos en hologos, places the complement theos, God, before the verb ein, to be, and does not give it an article like ho theos. You have ho logos, the word, but you don't have the God. En archē en ho logos, kai ho logos en proston theon, kai ho theos? No, kai theos. No article ho. Kai theos en ho logos. It's extremely difficult to catch this nuance in English. Hard to translate. Nonetheless, the author deliberately avoids saying that the Word and God are one and the same thing. He doesn't collapse Word and God into each other. They're distinct. Maloney's translation, what God was, the Word also was, indicates that the Word and God retain their uniqueness despite the oneness they share that flows from their intimacy, proston. In other words, he does not want people to come away from this saying, God and Word are interchangeable terms. No, what he's saying is, what the Word is and what God is, what they share together, they share the same mystery, the same relationship, but they are distinct, Word and God. This is going to be important because later on, Word is going to become Son, and God is going to become Father. You understand? Okay.
That's why they don't say God is the Word.
No, they don't say that. Yeah.
The Word is God.
That's right. They don't say that. They don't say that. And it's important to understand that our creed develops after. I'm not saying it's contradictory. I'm just saying that is a development. That's additional. That's not exactly what, John isn't saying that in the literal sense.
Is that why they changed some of the words in the creed recently?
No, that was a translation thing to bring back a number of things. That's an interesting, maybe at lunch we can talk about that. That's a great question, Rose. But no, the short answer is no, it's not. With what did the Greek philosophers associate the idea of hologos, or the Word? Viewed distinctly by different thinkers, hologos is the ultimate intelligibility of reality. But the text we call the Gospel of John was not written for Greco-Roman sophisticates or Mediterraneans at large. Hell, the text was not written for anyone outside the Johannine Jesus group. Not even fellow Israelites. Not even sheep not of this fold, other Jesus groups. It was written for this Johannine community with a particular anti-language and anti-society. And there's more still. The author of the Gospel has chosen hologos to hint from the start that from the proston theon, the intimacy of God, a word will be spoken. A word exists to say something, ladies and gentlemen. A word exists to disclose, to communicate. Therefore, revelation, God's self-disclosure, is one of the dominating themes of the fourth gospel, and it appears in this very first verse. An archē en ho logos. In the beginning was the Word. From the beginning, God has sought to disclose God's self, to reveal God's self. That means the Word is a revealer, right? Later we're going to learn who this Word is. Jesus Christ. So in the fourth gospel, Jesus is primarily a revealer. And that's why his mighty deeds and his wonders are not called mighty deeds and wonders in the Gospel of John. They're called signs, because they reveal. Let's take a short break.